Hey guys, Tony here from FreshCapMushrooms.com, and you might know this already, but every single Friday, me and Tegan do this thing live on Instagram and Facebook called FreshCap Friday Live, where we just kind of interact with everybody and answer questions and talk about various things about mushrooms. But we started to bring on live guests where we're going to be doing live interviews with people in the mushroom industry and various topics of health and mycology, etc. So this week we actually did an interview with Eric Myers from Myers Mushrooms, and it was really fun. We got into the weeds talking about a lot of specific techniques about small-scale mushroom cultivation, talked about some of the cool stuff that he's doing and some of the new equipment that he's helping to design. So here's the interview with Eric Myers, and like I said, we're going to be doing this kind of thing every single week, so be sure to check it out on Instagram and on Facebook, and yeah, we'll hop right into the interview.
Hey.
All right, how we doing?
Really good, really good. Thanks so much for joining us on FreshCap Friday Live. This is fantastic.
Yeah, good to be here. I'm at work right now, but I managed to get a little break so I can chat with you guys and see what's going on.
Awesome, really appreciate it. Well, yeah, we always get lots of questions about growing mushrooms, so I thought it'd be really fun to have you on. Anybody watching out there, if you don't know Eric, he's a mushroom grower. He's an educator. He's got lots of really amazing videos to teach people how to grow mushrooms and really focusing on kind of small-scale commercial cultivation. And one of the other really cool things that Eric's done and is doing is designing equipment that is kind of specifically for small-scale mushroom cultivation. So if you've been following the channel, I just posted a video with his drum sterilizer, but Eric's also got a brand new sterilizer that he's designed with T.R. Davis and a machine shop. So I'm going to get you to talk a little bit about that, but I thought we'd start just kind of asking you, how you got into mushrooms in the first place. It's such a niche topic. Everybody kind of gets attracted to mushrooms in a different way, but what got you into mushrooms in the first place? And then, how did that bring you to where you are today?
Mushrooms, when I was in Maryland, I did a little shiitake log. That was my first real experience doing some stuff in my backyard. Nothing serious. It was just 2 shiitake logs. And then when I went to El Paso, I'm in the military, so I PCS'd. I moved to El Paso, Texas, and I kind of needed a hobby, and I was like, okay, what do I want to do? And I was looking at the, market gardener kind of stuff, like Curtis Stone, JM48 kind of stuff, and I was like, I didn't really have the space. I didn't have, acreage or anything like that. And then I saw this whole indoor mushroom cultivation thing, and there wasn't a whole lot of information that was good out there on how to do it or how to build the equipment or anything like that. So I kind of started tinkering in my garage. One of the first things I made was like an automated pressure cooker. We're using a PID controller. And then I started working on bulk sterilization. So I made a couple different sterilizer drums, and then I finally came up with the setup that works with the float valve, the kind of standard issue that a lot of people are doing now. And especially in El Paso, I found that it was a good market, and that's the most important thing, where you have a market that wants wants fresh gourmet mushrooms, and it was geographically isolated to where they couldn't, even if they did want to get mushrooms shipped in, they couldn't, because it was coming from so far away. The nearest farm was like 1,300 miles away. So I really had the market there, and I did really well. I'm not in El Paso anymore. I'm now in Kansas. I'm in Wichita, Kansas. I sold the operation off there, and it's doing really well. It's still under the Myers Mushrooms name. So yeah, and that's kind of how I started off, just tinkering in my garage and filling a niche that was needed to be filled, So yeah.
Yeah, no, and that's a great point they bring up. Mushrooms, a lot of them, especially oyster mushrooms, they don't travel well. So it does provide an opportunity for small-scale mushroom farmers all over the place that can sell kind of the local community and local restaurants. And, if you go into typically a grocery store and you look at the oyster mushrooms, they're not going to be that good, right? But if you get them at the farmer's market from a local farmer, if you get them at the grocery store from a local farmer, the difference in quality is really, it's astounding.
Yeah.
So,
absolutely. Yeah,
that's really cool. So you said you started with shiitake logs, and then what mushrooms did you start growing after that? Were you focusing on oysters or?
I grew the best mushroom for a noob, which is golden oysters, or not golden oysters, pink oysters. Yep. Pink oysters were the most forgiving, and they are they're quick colonizers. Even if the logs are contaminated, they'll rip through and give you some fruits. So that was the first oyster mushroom that I really cultivated. The downside of pink oysters is their shelf life is horrible. Yeah. They have like a couple single digit days in the fridge and they turn to garbage. So I quickly learned that I couldn't sustain sales of pink oyster, and then I went on to the gray oyster and blue oysters. Um, but yeah, for the most part, what I've been cultivating, I would say at least 90% of the market that I've been selling to has been oyster mushrooms, a little bit of lion's mane, and then a little bit of shiitake. But I'm sure, as you're aware, shiitake just take so much time to incubate, and when you're doing it in a 2-car garage, you don't have all that space to really just have these blocks, hundreds and hundreds of blocks sitting there. So I kind of veered away from those.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good choice. Start with a mushroom like an oyster mushroom, which is hard to find good quality locally, unlike shiitake, which can definitely ship further distances.
Yeah,
and pink oysters,
that's
where
definitely a big factor.
yeah, in El Paso,
Yeah,
Texas, they're kind of a warmer weather mushroom, so it probably worked pretty well there. Um,
yeah,
aside from the shelf life, obviously.
yeah.
So, no, that's great. I know like a lot of people kind of aspire to grow mushrooms out of their garage and grow mushrooms into a market. What kind of advice would you give to somebody who's just starting out? They look at your YouTube channel and they're like, wow, that's really cool. Like, but it seems like, I have a lot to learn and there's a lot of equipment to get. Like what is the first step you would say to an aspiring mushroom grower?
One is to watch as many videos and see all the different ways, because the way that I do it is the way that I do it, and then other people might do it a little bit differently. It depends on if you're in a garage or in a basement or in a workshop. You might use different methods or techniques or equipment or whatever, depending on where you're at, and your budget's going to be another big factor with that as well. But one of the other really good pieces of advice would be get a mentor. Either hire a consultant or go to some kind of class. I offer classes. There's other mushroom farmers that offer classes as well. Get that hands-on, because a lot of times I notice the newer growers, they think they understand it, but they really don't, because they've never done it before. So they go to do it on their own and they're doing it completely wrong. I'm sure you've seen it before, like people who build a flow hood and it's like a box fan, like strapped to like a furnace filter.
Yeah.
So, and they don't realize, they think that they're doing it right. So it's one of those things that you can be doing it wrong the whole time and not even know it, because you haven't had the proper guidance and oversight from other people. So yeah, definitely reach out to a more experienced person. A lot of times a local mushroom farmer might be willing to train you, or at least show you the ropes. There's more than enough in the market for everybody. There's more enough room in the market for everybody to come in, especially if you communicate with your local farmers rather than have hostile kind of environment where you're trying to beat them and outcompete them. Just work together, work as a team. So
yeah, I agree. I think there's so much opportunity in the market, and I've heard an interesting stat that the total amount of mushrooms consumed in the United States is equivalent to the total amount of asparagus, just asparagus alone. So that's a really interesting statistic. So there's just so much room to grow, especially for these gourmet varieties. I mean, you probably don't want to grow doing asparagus or button mushrooms or anything like that and competing with the 200 million pound a year farms. But if you can grow chestnut mushrooms or a specific strain of pink oyster or something, that's a really cool place to start. Now, Tegan's saying there's some questions.
Yeah, no, Kaizen Mushrooms is saying that everything that they've learned were from your old YouTube videos, Eric. So that's awesome. And then Fungal Guide is asking, what type of licensing is required for small scale operations when you're selling?
Okay, so that's an excellent question, and I get that a lot. But I can't answer that because it depends. It depends on where you live, by state or by country. So the best answer to that is get your USDA rep for your region, for your state. Contact that rep and contact them and see what kind of licenses. Some of them will require no license, like Texas, for example, does not require a license. But I'm in Kansas now, and Kansas, I don't believe requires a license, but if you're selling forage mushrooms, you have to have like an identifier permit. So it depends on where you live. It depends on that. And then also sometimes farmers markets might require additional something. They might require food handlers permit. They might require, who knows. So you really need to do your own research on that and contact your own local professionals.
So. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense.
I know we had a question.
Yeah, we had another question. Somebody asked us to ask you kind of live here, and this is getting into the weeds a little bit. It's pretty specific, but they want to know about using diatomaceous earth in grains in wheat bran to deter weevils, and if using that has any effect on mycelium. So I don't know if that's something you've mentioned before, but
I have. So like if you ever I've had weevils before. It got into my bran really bad. I had a sack of bran where they were just boring through it. and then it made a mess of everything because then it spread to my millet and it was just everywhere. So yeah, I have used it in my grain before. The best bet to guard from weevils is to put your grain, well, keep your stores low. Don't stock up. That was my mistake. I was like, oh, I'm going to go load up, fill my truck up with like 600 pounds of grain so I don't have to come back again. And I brought it all home and, 6 months supply or whatever it was, and it all got infected or infested. So the best bet is keep your supplies low. And then if you do get it, put it into 5-gallon buckets once you open it up. And if you have weevils, you can put diatomaceous earth in it, and it will cut back on your weevils. And the other thing is the flower moths. Flower moths, they love like your bran and your soybean hulls. And you're kind of always going to get a little bit, but you want to keep it controlled. So I'll put my soybean hulls will go in a 55-gallon drum because it's, I'll have like 2,000 pounds of it. That would be like 70 buckets or something like that if I was doing 5-gallon buckets. So I do 55-gallon drums, and I'll just layer a little bit of diatomaceous earth at the bottom, and then a little bit at the middle, and then a little bit at the top, and it helps mitigate the infestation of that. And I haven't noticed any different. Like, we still get great yields. We'll get 3-pound first flushes off of a 10-pound block. So it's not like you're going to sacrifice yield. It's an inert chemical, or not chemical, but it's an inert material. It's just skeletons, little tiny skeletons. So yeah, I mean, I would definitely do that. I don't see any issues why you wouldn't want to do that with storing, and it's very commonly used for silos. They'll when they're filling a silo, they'll put it in with the grain to keep rodents and bugs out of it. So
yeah, and I've seen it before too, to just help the flow for something like chicken feed. Like if you need to buy a diatomaceous earth, you'll go to like a feed store, and they typically have it where they're going to be using it to feed. And yeah, I wouldn't doubt that mushrooms have no problems ripping through any of that kind of stuff.
Not at all. Not at all.
Yeah, so I think there's another question coming up here. Oh, yeah, somebody wants to know about using spent brewer's grain. That's actually a really interesting thing. I know here in Alberta, there's a farmer that's using spent brewer's grain as a substrate for mushrooms. Do you have any experience with that, or what are your thoughts on using something like that?
So one of the things I used to do is brew, and that's why it's a lot of the hardware and rigging stuff up. I'm good at it. I built a couple brewing rigs before. So I have the experience, and I've dealt with brewer's grain before. The biggest downfall of brewer's grain is it either needs to be dehydrated or used immediately, dehydrated, or refrigerated, because it spoils within like a day or two. It gets rancid. So that's the biggest downfall of it. Now, if you live next to a brewery, that might not be an issue. But I don't, and basically it makes it to where it's not convenient. You can't just, I have 2,000 pounds, I'm good for the next 3 months. You got to run out every week on the day that you're mixing in. The other thing is, depending on what the grain bill was, what they made, what kind of beer, it'll be a different moisture content, because they might a lighter beer, they might run it out and not use as much grains, so the grains get drained out better, and so they're a drier moisture content. So like every batch that you mix in, you have to adjust the moisture content like by feel, rather than just sticking to the math like you can with say like the soybean hull and fuel pellets that are compressed, and it's very low moisture content. The other thing is the nutrition is not optimal, so you're probably going to do like a 3-part blend, which gets complicated compared to typically you get away with like a 2-part blend where it's soybean hull and fuel pellets, or wheat bran and fuel pellets, or a sawdust. But yeah, so you'd want a 3-part blend because there's not a lot of protein in there. It's a lot of the sugars and all that gets leached out during the brewing process. So it's really just like some plant fiber, maybe a little bit, a little bit of sugars, not a whole lot of protein in there. And that's really what you want, is the protein. So yeah. Yeah,
it's a similar concept to, the idea of using spent coffee grains is such a good idea because it's kind of a waste product. And yeah, you can grow oyster mushrooms on it, but it's definitely not an ideal substrate by itself, and it's really contamination. So it's one of those things that's a great idea, but I don't think it's been perfected yet. So it's still room to go on that one.
Absolutely. And a lot of these substrates are cheap, and they are agricultural waste. It's not like companies are going out of their way to produce soybean hull or to produce meal. That it's a byproduct of making wheat or making soybean oil. So we're using we're using waste material. We're not using like virgin material. And they're cheap. They're like, soybean hulls are like $100 a ton if you're buying them bulk, and maybe 200 if you're buying them sacked, or 300 if you're buying them sacked. So going out of your way to save a couple pennies per bag and then get a significantly lower yield. You're not going to get a 3-pound flush off of a 10-pound bag with Brewers grain. I highly doubt it. I'd love to see it. I'm not saying that's not possible, but I doubt it.
Yeah. No, you're right. You got to look at the overall picture, the overall yield picture.
Yeah,
makes a lot of sense. So, I want you to talk about, if you still have time, a little bit about your new farm, and as part of that, talk about the new sterilizer that you got going on.
Yeah. So I moved to Wichita in March, and we bought a house, and I got a 2,500 square foot workshop. And I shopped around a lot, so it's pretty much what I wanted. It was already insulated. It already had a slab, and it already had a big 200 amp service out there. There's natural gas, so I can hook up a heater. And I'm going to be building it into a mushroom farm, and then to supply local mushrooms for Wichita. And then also the other half of it's going to be a spawn lab where I have a big double door autoclave. Well, it's not very big because like TR Davis has like a 25 footer. Mine it's 4 feet by 3 feet tall and 2 feet wide. So it could fit about 85-pound bags, like 60 to 85-pound bags. So I hope to do spawn production, sell nationwide, and then also do the fresh mushrooms for the local area. And so right now I'm just in the starting phases of it. We did the floors, we're doing the floor drains. We started pulling some electrical wires, and right now we're framing. So if you want to check on that, and I've, Facebook, MyersMushrooms.com is where I'm posting a lot of the pictures like every week. And then I'll post a video like when I hit a big, I think a video is actually going live today of the framing. When I hit a big kind of benchmark, I'll put a video on it. So probably every week to 2 weeks, I'll do that. And I'm hoping to be in operation by like July, maybe August. So we'll see if I can keep it on schedule. But I'm full-time military. I get off of work at 4, and then I get right to it with the mushrooms till like 9 o'clock at night doing construction. So I got some buddies that are helping out, some workers, and some of my coworkers that are helping out. So hopefully we'll stay on schedule. Yeah.
Awesome.
Very cool.
Yeah.
I think the spawn, being able to ship spawn nationwide will be really cool, because that's and you're in a pretty good location for that, right?
It is. You really couldn't ask for a better location, for real. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
and that's a huge need. I mean, going back to like how people get started, one of the things that's really hard for them to do is to make spawn, right? Because anybody can maybe pasteurize straw or whatever and grow mushrooms outside, but to make the spawn, that's kind of a difficult process. So to be able to supply new people with that is a really good thing to do, I think.
Yeah, and a lot of the spawn companies are lacking in customer support. Like, say, Amisil, for example, like it's a great spawn company. It's one of the biggest spawn companies in the U.S., but they're really catered to big mega farms and shipping truckloads and pallets full. So when it comes to, people like you and me that just need 2 bags, like currently the process is you have to call up, you have to find out the price, you have to mail a check, wait for the check to clear, the check clears, and they ship it. So it's just this long process when, in the current times, we should be able to click online and buy it. So, buy it online at 2 o'clock in the morning. There should be an issue with that. So with me doing the spawn, it'll be listed online and I can ship nationwide. So it'll be filling a niche where there's no sponsor providers where I'm in central United States that are shipping nationwide that have online purchase capability, and it'll be same day. Like Aloha, yes, you can order online, but a lot of times it's like a 6-week lead time. Like they don't have bags ready to ship. So I won't be doing that. It'll be hopefully that next week or that week I'll be shipping out spawn on a schedule, every week.
That's awesome.
So,
and do you plan on doing a variety of different species with that too?
Yeah, I'm going to keep it to like just the basic, profitable ones. I'm not going to do all the crazy. I'm not going to be selling morel spawn or anything like that. Yeah, right. So it'll just be, oyster, king oyster, shiitake, lion's mane, chestnut, pio maybe some golden oyster. That's pretty much it. I don't want to get too overwhelmed where I'm juggling, 30 different strains and trying to keep spawn on hand for each one of them.
Yeah.
And that should help. The way I look at it is that should help the people who are buying from me too, because especially for the beginner grower, it's very easy to overwhelm yourself with growing too many varieties. You know, like, oh, I want to have all the different colors on my table at the farmer's market. But whenever you do that, you're going to lose in yield. You're not going to be able to produce as much as your operation can produce if you're juggling 4 different species and 7 different strains. You know, it's just never going to work out like that.
And then try and have them all ready for market day at the same time.
Trying to time it all, exactly. Opposed to doing just oyster mushrooms and getting it timed perfectly to where you know that this batch is going in that day and it'll be ready the day before market because you do it every week, you know. Yeah, for sure.
Awesome. Well, I know you're taking time out of your day, so I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I think there was one more question if you're okay with that.
Yeah.
There was a couple.
Oh, then the sterilizer too. We didn't mention the sterilizer.
Oh yeah, if you want to talk about the sterilizer, I watched a video that you did about that. That seemed really, really interesting. I don't know if you can talk about that a little bit.
Yeah.
Am I still there?
Yeah.
You are. Your audio is still there, but your video is a spinning circle.
The video is a spinning
My video froze. So yeah, the sterilizer. So I've been making the sterilizers with Bubba's barrels for a while. And those are great and all, but they definitely have some downfalls. Mainly the fact that it's a single vessel, so you have to load it and unload it, and you really don't want to load, dirty mixing in your lab, but you want to unload it in your lab. So what we went ahead and did was we made a double door sterilizer to where you can have it mounted to your lab wall. You can load it from the outside, the dirty side. And then it has not carts, but it has shelves that pull out. You'd load it with the bags, push the shelves in, close that door, run the cycle. It's PID controlled. And then, so it's a digital controller. And then after a day of a cycle, you would go around the lab on the inside and you would open it up under HEPA conditions to where it's nice, clean air. And it's the first of its kind being made in the U.S. That's not, they do make autoclaves, but they're like $40,000. We have it priced just under $7,000. The main thing that's driving the price up so much is the paint. We had to find a paint that was able to hold up to, the steam. Everything else, we had to trial like 7 different types of paint to finally find one that wouldn't peel and bubble. So, yeah.
Yeah, I know it looks really, really cool, and I can imagine being so useful because, that's such a bottleneck for most people who are starting up a small farm is how do I sterilize all the substrate in a reasonable amount of time? And, the options so far are either, small pressure cooker on the stove or like a homemade 55-gallon drum or, buying a gigantic $50,000 autoclave. So I think that's a really cool solution that you guys came up with that will be useful for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Big time.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Very cool. So we do have one more question, and it's from Noisy Nico. He's saying, what advice would you give to new entrepreneurs looking to use the 5-gallon bucket method with straw and coffee beans? Is that kind of a viable thing to do?
I would say not to, simply because you think you're saving all these trees or whatever by using plastic buckets, but now you're drilling holes in these buckets, and now you probably have more plastic waste at the end of, like, usually people do buckets for a couple of weeks or a couple of times and they move on because they realize, hey, this is too much work to clean all these buckets and I'm going to move to bags or some other process, So I would say not to. You can use thin bags. I have biodegradable bags on my website too if you would like to use biodegradable bags if that makes you feel better. But the fact that you're going to buy or find, say 10 5-gallon buckets, they probably weigh a total of, 30 or 40 pounds of plastic. And now you're drilling holes in all of them, rendering them useless for anything else. Mm-hmm. And the main issue with it is cleaning them all.
Yeah.
Opposed to if you were just going to go out and buy, say, a quarter pound of bags that would do the same process, and then you just throw them out or biodegrade them if they're biodegradable. That's much more useful because I think almost every mushroom grower that I know that's experienced probably has a couple buckets floating around with holes in them that are either taped over them or they're using them for a planter for plants in them or something, because we don't do that anymore. It's kind of like a beginning process. So I would definitely stick with bags even as a beginner, or jars. You could do glass jars. but they're kind of dangerous because when they shatter, you know.
Yeah. Well, and I agree with you on the buckets. I mean, it is fun to do a bucket grow in your backyard or something. If you're just going to do one or two, it is, you know, it works pretty well, and you don't want to buy a big roll of poly or something like that. But I think for any kind of small scale commercial, it doesn't really make a lot of sense to do the 5-gallon bucket method.
No, it's not a commercial. Yeah, not at all. Not at all. And one of the biggest issues with the buckets is that I found was the core temperature gets really hot. If you ever probe it, it's like 104 degrees in the middle because the plastic is so thick and the buckets are so wide diameter that you get the heat just sinks into the middle and the center cooks. And that makes it to where your yields are not very high.
Yeah. No, I agree. And if you guys want to see a good picture of that, if you got Paul Stemets for Growing Gourmet Medicinal Mushrooms, he shows a log that's too big and cut it in half, and you can see right in the center, you know, everything dies because it gets too hot and it doesn't get enough air. So I guess the solution to that would be putting a PVC right through the middle with holes drilled in that as well, but then you're just getting more plastic and a little more complicated as well.
And then you're also going to get mushrooms coming out of that hole probably down in the middle where you can't even harvest them. So it's like, yeah.
Definitely. So excellent. Well, I think we'll probably wrap it up there. I don't know if anyone wants to check out Eric's work, you can go to, where can we find you?
So I have myersmushrooms.com, and that from there you can kind of see all the different, if you go all the way to the bottom, you can see all the different things that I have. So Bubba's Barrels makes the drums that I've helped do. And then I have YouTube. I have a Vimeo as well. So if you want to see some of my older videos, because my channel got deleted a year ago, which is a story for another day, that you can find on Vimeo. Almost all the videos I uploaded on Vimeo.com/MyersMushrooms. On YouTube, I only uploaded maybe like 40 or 50 of the older videos. And I always post videos earlier on Vimeo. Like the video that's coming out today on YouTube was posted last week on Vimeo to try to drive people to Vimeo. And then what else? And then I got on Facebook. Very often you'll find me on the mushroom growing Facebook group. So request to join that if you're not in it already. Check it out. There's some good growers, and there's a lot of new people in there too. You know, but you got to make room for everybody and be courteous and kind and help even the ones that don't even know what the heck they're talking about. You know, give them a guiding light. So.
Yeah, no, I agree. No, that's a great group, mushroom growing group. And then, yeah, if they can find you on Vimeo, I see you got lots of really good videos on there and on YouTube as well. So, well, I can't thank you enough for coming on and sharing your wisdom with everybody out here. If we didn't get a chance to answer your questions, you can always send me an email, and I'll see if I can find out the answer later and get back to you. But, yeah, thanks again, Eric, and we appreciate you coming on.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. Have a good one.
You too.
All right, take care.
See ya.